Welcome and thank you for volunteering to be peer reviewers. My name is Terry Bennett, and I'm here with other members of our high school success team at the Oregon Department of Education, and I will let them introduce themselves. First,
Susie McCarsky.
Hi, I'm Jan McCoy.
Tara Hernandez.
This webinar is for peer reviewers of our high school success plans. The purpose of this training is to provide an overview of high school success, highlight the importance of applying the Oregon equity lens to each aspect of the plan, identify the purpose and role of peer reviewers, highlight our data sheets, review the plan and the tool itself, and discuss effective written feedback. We welcome any questions that you have, and we will pause throughout the webinar to check for questions. However, if you're more comfortable, you can submit those electronically. Looks like we have 13 of us out there, so with that, we're going to move on. Let's begin by answering the basic question, what is high school success? So high school success was initiated by a ballot in November of 2016. The measure passed with 65% voter support. During the current school year, we had a total of 255 recipients. That's school district, charter schools, youth corrections, and juvenile detentions. The spirit of the measure was to provide funding to establish or expand around 3 programmatic areas: dropout prevention strategies, career and technical education, college-level educational opportunities. Additionally, recipients are able to use 15% of their allocation. However, this 15% is not required, but it is available for services to students during their 8th grade year. This is interpreted as the beginning with the completion of the 7th grade coursework, so the day after they finish their 7th grade year, support during the summer, induction service prior to the beginning of the 8th grade year through their 8th grade school year. High school success is evaluated based upon what's written in the law. So high school success is intended to improve students' progress towards graduation beginning with 9th grade, freshmen on track, increase the graduation rate of high schools, and improve high school graduates' readiness for college and career.
And so these next couple of slides focus on the Oregon Equity Lens. So the Oregon Equity Lens was vetted by more than 60 organizations and individuals throughout the state, including high school students. Feedback from the organizations added clarity and guided the development of our core beliefs, which are: every student has the ability to learn, speaking a language other than English is an asset, special education services are an educational responsibility, students previously described as at risk are the best opportunity to improve outcomes. Intentional proven practices must be implemented to return out of school youth to an educational setting. Supporting great teachers is important. Ending disparities and gaps in achievement begin in quality delivery. Resource allocation demonstrates priorities and values. Shared decision-making with communities will improve outcomes. All students should have access to information about future opportunities. Community colleges and universities play a critical role in serving diverse rural and ELL communities, and rich history and culture is an asset to celebrate. Moving on to the next slide. By using the Oregon Equity Lens, we aim to provide a common vocabulary and guide for decision making. In every decision we make, it is important for us to consider equity and the impact on all students and families, especially those in underserved demographic groups and protected classes. Some key questions to ask about the proposed change are: who are the racial and ethnic and underserved groups affected? What is the potential impact of the resource allocation and strategic investment to these groups? Does the decision being made ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended consequences? What is the impact on eliminating the opportunity gap? How does the investment or resource allocation advance the 40-40-20 goal? What are the barriers to more equitable outcomes, for example, mandated political, emotional, financial, programmatic, or managerial? How have you intentionally involved stakeholders who are also members of the communities affected by the strategic investment or resource allocation? How will you modify or enhance your strategies to ensure each learner and community's individual and cultural needs are met? And how are you collecting data on race, ethnicity, and native language? And what is your commitment to the P20 professional learning for equity? What resource are you allocating for training and cultural responsive instruction? And I know I just said a lot of questions and a lot of really key points, and please, peer reviewers, know that there is a handout with resources, and all these questions are listed there for you to access. So equity is fundamental in the use of Measure 98 funds. Recipients applied the Oregon Equity Lens during self-assessment when considering eligibility, and the Oregon Lens will be used as we review plans. Also, improved outcomes are expected to be expanded beyond the population that has been served to include specific student populations for whom the current system does not work. And also, this work intended to target historically and currently marginalized students through data-informed planning. That is, data should be reviewed to see how student populations are performing. So the following graph that we have illustrates the 2013-14 graduation rate data situated inside the 16-17 data. As you can see, the graduation rates have slightly improved, but there is still room for growth among all student populations. At this point, we'd like to pause to see if anybody has any questions.
Start the show. I know.
Go ahead, Eli. Does anybody have any questions out there at this time?
I don't think they can talk to us.
You can tell them they can type it.
Go ahead.
All right. As you get into the plans, by the way, we had anticipated that many of the peer reviewers would be applicants. That is not the case. So we're recognizing that many of you may not have seen much of these plans in the past. So we're going to talk a little bit about the content of the plans. For your review, you're going to be looking at a planning process that includes 5 components: a vision, a collection of eligibility requirements that were all identified through a self-assessment that each applicant completed prior to planning. Then they developed goals, activities, and outcomes. And we are asking you to take a look at each of these 5. The vision is to be clear and concise. We called for 75 words or less. The space into which they're putting the text could handle something much larger, but we really are hopeful that people will be fairly brief on these visions. And it should describe the embedded practices the recipient is currently doing or will be doing to address how outcomes will change for those students who are not being served by the current system. Now, when we talk about expansion, we're talking primarily about expansion to new students, not expansion of services that current students are already receiving. And by that, I don't mean current students within the district, but rather the students who are already in a CTE program. Getting a better CTE program has value, but more students in that CTE program has greater value. One of the things that's required through the eligibility was teacher collaboration time around data. This is required by law. This is not something that ODE added to the rules. We asked, does the plan provide sufficient time for teachers and staff of students in grade 9 to review data on students' grades, absences, and discipline by school and by course, and to develop strategies to ensure at-risk students are on track to graduate? Clearly, it would be valuable if this were broader than 9th grade, but that's what the rules and laws say, and we would encourage districts to go beyond that, but we require districts to address 9th grade. Secondarily, the practices to reduce chronic absenteeism is specifically called out in the rules and law. Are there district-wide evidence-based practices for reducing chronic absenteeism in grades 9 through 12? With each of these, they may well have indicated in their self-assessment that they have already fully addressed these points. To the extent they've not, that will be indicated in their plan tool, and that should be something you're looking for in their plans. That is, if they haven't said that's fully embedded in their work and they're not called for in the plan, then the plan is short. The next aspect is equitable assignment to advanced courses. Is it identified in the plan how high school students will be assigned to advanced and college level courses based on multiple academic qualifications in order to avoid bias in course assignments? Next up is systems ensuring on-time graduation. That is, does the plan identify how systems will be implemented to ensure that high school students, including English language learners, are taking courses required for on-time graduation? And then finally, partnerships. Districts are required to establish local partnerships appropriate to the local context with other nonprofits, other districts, federally recognized tribes, community organizations, trade and industry partners, colleges and universities. Of course, this is a variable issue depending upon the location and community in which the district is located, but they should be making an effort to establish broad partnerships. During the self-assessment, recipients identified each of these areas of eligibility by indicating whether they were embedded, that is, so ingrained in their work that it is distinguishing feature of their culture; practicing, that is, something that they do on a regular basis without feeling like it's fully embedded, but still it is guaranteed to be occurring; emerging, in that they might be just in the beginning stages of addressing a particular aspect of eligibility; or not yet, as in they have not yet begun to work on that area of eligibility. With either emerging or not yet, we would anticipate that the district would have addressed the requirement within their ongoing plan as they developed it. All areas of eligibility must be fully in place in the high school level by the end of the 2020-21 school year. That is, they're not required to have those things in place at this point, but they need to be working toward having them in place within 3 more school years. Next up, we have the goals and activities. This portion of the plan is intended to create specific goals and align activities to those goals that will encourage progress toward the goals. That is, what are they trying to accomplish with their high school success effort, and what are they going to do in an attempt to accomplish that? And then we ask for outcomes, both short-term and long-term. These two are required by law, and in fact, it specifically calls for short-term and long-term outcomes. For many districts, and as we've been saying repeatedly, the short-term outcomes should probably emphasize change in adult behaviors. That is, how are adults in the system going to behave differently in order to move toward the desired outcomes, goals rather. Long-term outcomes may well have to do with outcomes at the student level. And at this point, we're going to ask, are there any questions? We don't see any typed in, but you're certainly welcome to share with us if you need to. Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to the purpose of peer review. Now that you have a better understanding of what high school success is, we can begin to identify the purpose of peer review and ultimately your role as a peer reviewer. Peer reviewers were called upon to ensure that all components of the law are embedded in each recipient's high school success plan. Your role as a peer reviewer is to take a look at each high school success plan you are assigned and look to ensure that the equity lens has been applied in the plan, ensure that the plan addresses the appropriate eligibility requirements that were identified through the recipient's self-assessment, ensure that the plan is focused on the required number of programmatic areas as determined by each recipient's funding level, which we will cover later on in our webinar, to identify potential areas of support and provide written feedback to recipients. So it is important to note that all high school success funds are not competitive. Every recipient is entitled to their funds, though they need to meet the requirements of the law. ODE staff has the responsibility to ensure that each district is able to provide an approvable plan. As a peer reviewer, your responsibility is to assist ODE in determining which plans are approvable and which ones may need additional discussion. Regarding the funding and programmatic area, is every recipient required to address all 3 programmatic areas in every school? No. The revision of the law by the legislature during the 2017 regular session created a tiered system for the 3 programmatic areas based upon funding levels. Recipients that received less than $100,000 in the first year of biennium funding may choose to address any or all 3 areas as is appropriate to the local need. Those who received between $100,000 but less than $350,000 must address career and technical education and one of the 2 other areas, but still may address all 3. Finally, recipients funded about $350,000 must implement all 3 areas. Now looking at the data review that we have provided to you, there's a data display available to you to assist you in evaluating and submitting the plans. The data presented was submitted by school districts during the 2016-17 school year. Please note an asterisk will appear in lieu of data when a student population has been suppressed to ensure student confidentiality. The data displays include some definitions to assist in interpreting the data. Here we have an example showing State of Oregon data. Note the 2017-18 funding allocation is displayed at the top of the data page for you to reference. The first part of the data display provides a demographic breakdown for each recipient. The second part includes graphs showing graduation, freshmen on track, dropout, and absenteeism rates for each recipient, both overall and for each numerically significant student populations. Again, an asterisk will appear in lieu of data when a student population has been suppressed to ensure confidentiality. Depending on the size of the recipient, data may be displayed in 1 or 2 graphs. The blue column indicates the recipient's overall rate, while the colored dots represent different student population rates. The next piece of data that we have provided for you includes student populations with unusually low graduation, freshman on track rates, or unusually high dropout or absenteeism rates. Recipients may need to evaluate and address these possible problematic areas. What we are looking for is that recipients use their data to inform their decision making. Again, we are checking in for questions prior to jumping into the plan and review tool. If you have any questions around the data displays that we've provided to you or the funding, please type those questions in and we can get those answered. All right, we're going to move on to the next section of our webinar.
So as a reviewer, you should have received an email today. Hopefully most of you have, and it will be like the one on the screen, and it will tell you that you could go to the site. You'd click on the green Go to Site box. If you're an applicant, you're going to have the blue applicant box along with the reviewer box. And if you're only a reviewer, you'll just have the reviewer box. Either way, we need you to click on the blue reviewer box. The next screen that you'll see will list the number of reviews. So some of you have received 2 reviews and some of you have 3. And so if you had 3, like in this example, it would show 0 out of 3 because those we haven't completed those. You're going to click on the blue start box. The next screen will list all of the plans that you have to review. The box that you would click wouldn't say continued, but it would say start. And the only time that box would say continue, like in this example, is if you had saved a draft to come back and work on it later, it would say continued. You would then click on that box. So again, it should say start for you, and then if you saved it, it would say continued.
Terry, if I may, we do have one question here. We have someone pointing out they have not yet received their invitations to the site. We can tell you that the site is ode.smapply, as in SurveyMonkeyApply.org. So once again, that's ode.smapply.org. You may want to look in your junk mail or spam folder to see if it might have gotten into there. We've been having some issues with this particular site getting dumped into trash, essentially.
Great question. When you do get into it, when you finally get into review a plan, you're gonna have a split screen. The plan will be on the left-hand side, and the review tool is gonna be on the right-hand side. And before you go any further, we're gonna ask that you would read the conflict of interest, if you had a conflict of interest, such as if you were a recipient and the system randomly gave you your own plan, then you would go ahead and click the conflict of interest box.
So let's go to the next slide. And just like Terry just said, please read through the conflict of interest statement, and if reviewing the recipient's plan is a conflict for you, please click that I have a conflict of interest and cannot continue button. That will bring a stop sign, just like you're seeing there. So if you have a conflict of interest, the stop sign will pop up below the statement. Please click below to send an email to ODE's High School Success Team, alerting us to reassign this recipient's plan for review and to assign you a new one. And for this slide, on the left-hand side, you will have 2 buttons, the summary and the application. So please click on the application button. Next, as you start your review, as you begin the review, now you will see a split screen. You have the review tool on the right-hand side and the recipient's plan on the left. As you begin the review process, we would advise you to read through the plan completely prior to using the review tool. As well, you may want to take some notes as you seek to gain understanding of the overall plan. Here are a few more things to note. There is a Jump to box in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. You can use this feature to skip ahead to specific sections of the plan instead of using the scroll feature. The second one, we're not asking you to review the recipient's self-assessment. Thus, using the Jump to box, you can jump down to the application round to begin reading the plan. Also, the arrows on the right side of the plan, not the review tool, but the right side of the plan, will allow you to minimize that section. Next, when reading through the plan, remember, we are not asking you to review the budget at the end of the plan. As you begin reviewing, you will want to have the plan and the review tool open at the same time in the split screen. So we'd like to again take this opportunity to see if anybody has any questions, please.
We do have one question, and that is, able to get into the application site, but unsure how to access the plans you're to review. The login is your email address, the email address to which we sent the invitation. You won't have a password assigned yet. In fact, the system should have sent you a verification email for your email address. And at that point, you'll be able to create a password. If you haven't received that, please get in touch. Best email is hssuccess@state.or.us. So that's hssuccess@state.or.us, and that will appear later on slides. As we get to the end here, we'll be offering that. With that, you can send us an email, and we can see to it that you get into the system. Okay. Perfect.
We are now moving into the part of where you will be clicking if these areas are in the plan or not. So we have provided the following rubric tool to help guide your review of the plan. The first section of the plan to review will be the vision and involvement of stakeholders. If you feel that the recipient has effectively engaged stakeholders in the development of the plan and vision, and that it is fully embedded and or fully meets the high school success expectations, you would click the yes box and the green light on the stoplight will come on. If it is somewhat or partially embedded and or not fully meeting high school success expectations, you would click the box and the yellow light would come on. If it is not embedded in the plan or not meeting expectations, the red light will come on.
Hang on a second, Tara. So we have another question. So that question is, do we not review the self-assessment or the budget? And that's correct. You do not have to review the self-assessment, and we're not asking you to give feedback on the budget. You're welcome to look at both because they'll be attached to their recipient's plan, but we're not asking for you to give feedback on that. The self-assessment was done by the recipient, which then informed those areas, those eligibility areas for the recipient to write their plan on, and the budget's based upon their ADMW. Based upon that, determine the programmatic areas that they had to address. Thank you, Tara.
All right. Now we're moving on the eligibility part of the review. You'll be using the same rubric format when you review eligibility requirements. Under the heading Eligibility Requirements are gray boxes with the required areas of eligibility that must be addressed in the plan. As you determine whether items listed under each eligibility requirements are embedded or not in their plan, keep in mind recipients are only required to address eligibility areas that were determined as not being fully embedded or practicing by their self-assessment. So this could be a place that you could go back and look in their self-assessment if you're wondering, but you do not need to review the self-assessment. You may need to reread sections of the plan to determine how fully in place each required area is within the eligibility component. For eligibility requirements that recipients reported as fully in place in their self-assessment, click the green highlighted sentence box. If the recipient did not address an eligibility requirement that was required by their self-assessment, click the red highlighted sentence box. At the end of each page, you will be given an opportunity to provide written feedback.
Another question that we have is if you get halfway through a review and you have to close out, is your work saved? And so at the end of each of the pages, that's right below the feedback box, there will be a box, a gray box that says Save Draft. And so you would click on the Save Draft, and in the earlier slide, we showed that there's a place where you would show the number of plans you have to review. It would give a listing of the recipient, and it would show continued on the ones that you saved. Okay, so that's a great question. You'll be able to save and go back to it.
All right, now we're moving on to the programmatic areas of the review rubric. You will be using the same rubric format when you review programmatic areas. Remember, programmatic areas are based upon funding allocations. Those funding allocations were at the top of the data displays that we talked about earlier. Begin by indicating which of the 3 programmatic areas of the plan is to be addressed. This is located at the beginning of the plan under the vision box. The recipient will list the programmatic areas they will be addressing. You will determine whether items listed under each programmatic area are fully embedded in the plan. If all boxes are checked, the stoplight will be green. If some of the boxes are checked, yellow, and if none are checked, it will be red. Again, you may need to reread sections of the plan to determine how fully in place each required area is within the programmatic area. You only have to review programmatic areas that the recipient identified as areas in their plan. Example, if they had only to adjust 1 or 2 areas, then the non-addressed areas or stoplights will be left red. At the end of each page, you will be given the opportunity to provide written feedback. So next section is the overall of the plan. You'll be using the same rubric format for this section. First, review the goals and check all the appropriate boxes. Remember, goals are founded on areas of growth identified in the recipient's self-assessment. They clearly define what the recipient wants to accomplish and should be specific, attainable, and measurable. Next, you will review the activities and determine if they are tied to the goals, engaging stakeholders, and are connected to outcomes, short-term and long-term outcomes. You will then check each of the following items that apply to the plan. The stoplight will function the same as during prior section reviews. We are then asking you check yes or no if any of the aspect of this plan represents an exemplar, and if it would be valuable to share with other recipients. In the written feedback box, provided a brief note describing what makes this an exemplar, as well as general comments addressing the plan holistically, including the section you just reviewed. When you finish with your feedback, click Submit. Throughout the 3 pages of the review, you are always able to save a draft and return to the review at a later time. Just please make sure that you click Save, because if you accidentally click out, it will not save your work. If you have any questions regarding using the rubric and the tool, please type them in the question box.
We're going to talk about feedback next, providing the written feedback. One of the suggestions that we would make is that if you wanted to use a Word doc and type up your written feedback and save it there, you could always do it in that and cut and paste into the feedback box at the end of each page.
Authentic feedback is a very important component of any learning cycle, and we're certainly attempting to employ it here. At the end of each section of the review, and there are 3 of them, there's an opportunity, as Tara pointed out, to provide written feedback. We encourage you to give feedback that's supportive and coaching in nature. This is not a critique, but rather coaching toward improvement. It should include both positive and negative observations while remembering to limit the amount of information to what the recipient can use. We encourage you to use the following model. Equity is the foundation upon which all high school success plans are built. As you review plans and look to provide feedback, please keep in mind the Oregon Equity Lens, the beliefs and questions. A link to the Equity Decision Tool pocket version has been provided, and we'll show you where you can get at that in just a few moments. Feedback should be educative in nature. The purpose of feedback is to provide information the recipient can act upon, to clear up misunderstandings, or to provide clarity. Please be sensitive to the individual needs of the recipient. Assume that they have worked hard on their plan and that they are giving their best effort. All feedback should come from a place of assuming best intent. Feedback should reference a specific component of the plan. Specificity is key. Be careful about giving blanket statements. Rather, call out specific components of the plan and make genuine suggestions or cite authentic wondering. Give genuine praise. If a component of the plan is praiseworthy, praise that part of the plan, but don't force yourself to praise, don't force praise on something that is not genuine. Provide a model or example. As you give feedback, if you have had a similar experience or know of research that would be beneficial to connect the recipients to, please provide it. And finally, ask for clarification. Even though you as the peer reviewer will not receive any response, asking for clarification causes the recipient to consider things she may not have considered before. It causes one to take a closer look at the plan in order to be more intentionally articulate. Very important point here is this is not a competitive grant where we're trying to get critiques that will eliminate recipients. This is about providing coaching for improving the outcomes of their plan. You want to go to the... We have provided a number of resources for you. It was linked, we provided a link that you see on the screen in the email that we sent to you yesterday, which welcomed you to this effort, not the invitation itself, but rather just an overview of the plan. This is linked through a Google document, which if you follow that link on your initial email, will take you into the document, and all of the things there are linked so that you can get further information. We mentioned the equity lens and the equity decisions. We have the PowerPoint that you're seeing right now, high school success plan feedback guidance, which addresses some of the things I was just talking about. The data that Tara talked about and is linked from right here. We have FAQs on reviewing the school success plans, which will be continually updated over the next 10 days as you go through your plans. We have technical support for using the review tool. This is information specific about what you need to do with the tool itself rather than how to provide the feedback. And then finally, just a general FAQ around high school success that may well be valuable to you in understanding the program more thoroughly.
There are two recorded videos. So one is basically this PowerPoint presented in a recorded video. It's roughly 20 minutes. If you wanted to watch that, you wouldn't necessarily need to. There is another recorded video that's just around 6 minutes. It really goes more specific into the review tool, and the arrow moves around to click on boxes and those things if you're still confused about how to use that. And so those two resources would help you navigate through reviewing the plan as well as using the review tool.
The timeline for this, peer reviews begin today, April the 10th, with completion targeted for no later than close of business on April the 24th, so 14 days from today. If you have any questions that we haven't answered, or if you come across questions, and we certainly would expect that you might, while you're trying to complete your reviews, please get in touch. You can either call the phone number listed here, 503-947-5796, or direct an email to hssuccess@state.or.us, and we would be happy to address your questions. We'll be monitoring those closely, and we'll respond as quickly as we possibly can. Indeed, we'll be monitoring those even in off hours to some extent, so you may be able to get a message back from us fairly quickly.
Are there any other questions out there? You could type those now, and we would take some moments to answer those questions. Not seeing some questions coming up. On behalf of the high school success team, myself, Terry Bennett, Susie McCarskey, Jan McCoy, and Tara Hernandez, we appreciate you coming into this webinar. We will record this webinar, and it will be available on that same page that Jan talked about if you wanted to go back to look at it. We appreciate everybody participating. Thank you.